Your name means the Dark One. If you are a Dunn, that is the literal 900-year-old translation. And there is a haunting story folded inside it. The name comes from the Old Irish for descendant of Donn and Dunne in Irish myth was the Lord of the Dead. Today we follow one surname across an ocean and across centuries. From a green hillside in Ireland, through the cruelest chapter of American history, all the way to a lunch counter in Kansas where a few teenagers quietly changed the country. And there is one place this whole journey lands that almost nobody expects.
Hey everyone, Grace here. Let me lay out the board, because this name is stranger than it looks. Dunn is not one name with one origin. It is at least 3 separate roots that happen to collide into the same spelling. The Irish thread is the famous one. Dunn is the anglicised form of Ó Duinn, which means descendant of Donn. And Donn comes straight from the Gaelic word Donn, which simply meant brown or dark.
Here is where it stops being a colour and starts being a legend. We already have the records for this. In Irish mythology, Donn, the Dark One, was an ancestor of the Gaels and a god of the dead. He lived in a place called Tech Dunn, the House of Donn, where the souls of the dead were said to gather. A 9th century poem even records his dying wish. To me, to my house, you shall all come after your deaths. So the name does not just mean dark, it carries a poetic echo of descent from the keeper of the afterlife. Now, to be clear and honest, no real family literally descends from a god. This is folklore, not genealogy.
I love that Lewis said that out loud because it means 3 completely separate roots collided into this one surname. That is the real headline here. Not one origin, but 3, all landing on the same 6 letters. And here is who this actually touches. This is one of the most common names on both sides of the Atlantic. In the United States alone, roughly 190,000 people carry it right now. If your last name is Dunn, this is your history too. Grace, there is one question everyone brings to this, so put it to us.
There is, and it is under every surname video we make. Is the name Dunn Irish or Scottish? And which one is the real origin? The honest answer is both, and neither is more real than the other. So let me show you exactly how one name grew 2 completely different meanings.
That is the door into the whole story. Grace is right that the split is the key, so let us open it up. Because depending on your family line, Dunn can mean 2 things that have nothing to do with each other.
One name, 2 meanings that never met. That is the puzzle of Dunn, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Depending on your family line, the name is either a description of a person or a description of a place.
So think about who these names were actually pinned on. Before surnames were fixed, people got called by the most obvious thing about them. And root A is exactly that. It is a nickname for the dark or brown one. It comes together beautifully because the Irish Donn and the Old English Dunn both meant the same thing, dark or brown. So an English Dunn might simply have been the person in the village with the dark hair. We even have an early record of it, a William Dunn in Gloucestershire back in 1180.
And this is exactly where the 2 families fork apart, so follow the split with me. One branch is the Dark One, the nickname we just heard. Root B is completely different. It comes from the Scottish Gaelic word Dunn, meaning a fort, a stronghold, a fortified hill. That Dunn was not dark-haired at all, that Dunn simply lived near the fort. Grace, you have been sitting on the obvious question, so ask it.
I have, and the record backs the fort up too, an Adam de Dunn in Scotland in 1255. So here is my question. If the 2 roots never connect, how did they end up as one identical name? Because that is the part that makes no sense on its face.
That is the exact thing that trips people up, so let me answer it plainly. They did not merge on purpose. 2 unrelated words in 2 languages simply drifted toward the same handful of letters. D-U-N-N. History is messy like that. The tidy version is a myth.
And to make it real, let me show you a Dunn, the actual thing the name points to. That stone ring on the cliff edge is a Dunn, a prehistoric hill fort on the Irish coast. Picture your ancestor living in its shadow, and you understand Root B in a single glance. No dark hair required, just a very old wall.
So the answer to the question we opened with is not one or the other. It is both, sitting side by side in the same 6 letters. Which brings us to the clue that tells you which branch your family came from, and it is hiding in 1 extra letter. One thing before the next part, and then we move right on. If any of this is clicking, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for the next one. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you would think.
One extra letter can tell you which side of Ireland your family stood on. Look at the spelling, Dunn or Dunn, and you are reading a 900-year fingerprint of 2 different journeys.
Here is who this helps. Anyone who has ever argued with a cousin about whether there is an E on the end. In most of Ireland, especially the province of Leinster, the Gaelic name is spelled Dunn with an E on the end. That is the Catholic, deeply Irish line.
Up in the north, in Ulster, it usually drops the E and becomes plain Dunn, where the bearers were often of Scottish descent. So the extra letter is not a typo. It is a quiet marker of 2 different histories, the Gaelic south and the Scottish planted north.
And just how Irish is the Dunn spelling? Let me put the 2 numbers side by side, because they tell opposite stories. In Ireland, Dunn is about the 26th most common surname in the whole country, carried by roughly 1 in every 215 people. That is astonishing density. It has held that rank with remarkable consistency for over a century.
But raw numbers tell the mirror image. The single largest population of Dunns on Earth is in the United States. The 2010 census counted about 141,000 of them, ranking Dunn the 197th most common surname in America. So sit with that contrast for a second, because it is the whole immigrant story in 2 numbers. Ireland has the highest concentration, the deepest roots, but America has the most Dunns by far. The name did not just survive the crossing, it multiplied. Bella, this is exactly the spot to bring our viewers in.
It is because so many of you have asked us this one directly. Do you spell it Dunn or Dunn, and does your family actually know why? Drop it in the comments, because that little E is a real clue to where you came from.
That multiplication in America is where the story turns, and where it gets far more powerful. Because a very large share of those American Dunns did not arrive on an immigrant ship at all. To understand how the name reached them, we have to talk about the hardest chapter honestly. About 1 in 7 people who carry the surname Dunn in America today is Black. Roughly 14%, according to census surname data. That is higher than the Black share of the country as a whole, and there is a real documented reason for it. To tell it right, we have to name the injustice plainly. Slavery in America was a system that denied enslaved people their humanity, and one of the ways it did that was by denying them a family name. A surname carried dignity, and that dignity was withheld on purpose. Lewis, take us to the moment that changed.
The moment is Emancipation, in 1865, and it created a task no free-born American had ever faced. 4 million people, suddenly free, now had to choose a surname of their own. The historian Douglas Egerton put it bluntly: few enslavers had ever bestowed the dignity a surname implied, so freedom came with a pen and a blank line.
I want people to feel the weight of that choice, because it was not small. Imagine choosing the name your grandchildren would carry forever. Some people took a former enslaver's name, sometimes an earlier one, as a deliberate way to distance themselves. Some chose a brand new name as a pure act of freedom. Some took names like Freeman, and some, quietly, reclaimed a name that had been theirs in secret all along. The historian Herbert Gutman documented this. Many enslaved families had kept surnames for generations, hidden from the people who owned them. Emancipation was not always picking a new name. Sometimes it was finally writing down the one you already had.
We can see it in the record. The Freedmen's Bureau, running from 1865 to 1872, generated millions of handwritten pages, marriage registers, labor contracts, bank books. For countless families, Those are the very first documents where an ancestor appears by full name, the first time the country wrote them down as whole people.
So how does a name like Dunn specifically end up in black families? Honestly, the same way so many did. Dunn was a common name among white enslavers across the South. Think Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, and Texas. When freedom came, people on those places often carried the Dunn name forward, whether it was the old owner's name or a name they chose for their own reasons.
And here is the honest boundary we hold. We cannot claim a specific family took a specific name. That would need a specific record, and inventing one would dishonor the truth. What we can say is documented and solid. This is the true, general path by which an Irish and Scottish name became a proud, common African-American name.
Proud is the right word. This is not only a story of something taken. It is a story of people claiming selfhood in the face of a system built to erase it. A name chosen in freedom is one of the most human things there is.
That is exactly where we landed. The surname that may have entered a family in slavery becomes, in freedom, a declaration. I am a person, I have a name, and I choose it. Now let me introduce you to one man who carried the name Dunn straight into the history books.
A man born into slavery took the oath as second in command of an American state, and almost no one today knows his name. That man was Oscar Dunn, and his story is the one they should teach in every school.
He was born into slavery in New Orleans around 1822. And here is the detail that gets me. His father was a carpenter who worked and saved until he could buy his family's freedom outright. That is where Oscar started. Owned, then bought back by his own father's hands.
Now watch the strategic climb, because it is remarkable. He earned the right to be seen, so here he is. That is Oscar Dunn, photographed by Matthew Brady's studio. In 1868, during Reconstruction, he was inaugurated Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana, the first African American ever to hold that office in any state in the Union, from enslaved child to the second highest office in the state.
He was no figurehead. In 1871, when the governor was away, Dunn served as acting governor for 39 days, the first black man to run a U.S. state, even briefly.
Then he used that office. Dunn fought for public schools open to every child, for the right to vote, and for equal protection under the law. He was building the future, not just occupying a title.
And then, at the height of it all, he died suddenly in 1871, and the funeral that followed stopped the city. He was only in his late 40s. Some believed he was poisoned by political enemies. Honestly, that was never proven, so we hold it as a suspicion, not a fact. What is not in doubt is the grief.
As many as 50,000 people lined Canal Street for his funeral. It was the largest New Orleans had ever seen. 50,000 for a man born a slave. And yet here is the part that should sting. Louisiana passed a law setting aside $10,000 for a monument to Dunn, and it was never built. The money was never spent. Lewis, that leaves one question hanging over all of it, so ask it.
It does, and it is a hard one. How does a man 50,000 mourned get erased so completely from memory? Because a century later, Dunn's own descendant, the historian Brian Mitchell, was told flatly by a teacher that Louisiana never had a black lieutenant governor.
The answer is that memory is a choice someone makes. Mitchell refused the erasure. He researched his ancestor and wrote a whole book to put Oscar Dunn back where he belongs, right at the front of the story.
Oscar Dunn is the peak of the name in politics. But the story of the American Dunns is not just one famous man. It is tens of thousands of ordinary families making an extraordinary decision. They looked at a South that wanted them gone, and they went looking for freedom.
"40,000 people packed what they could carry and walked away from the only land they had ever known. This was the Exodus of 1879, and they left not because they wanted to, but because the South after Reconstruction had become unlivable for them."
This is the Exodus of 1879, and it was the first great migration of Black Americans after the Civil War. When Reconstruction collapsed, so did their protection. They faced terror from white supremacist groups and crushing repression under the Black Codes, so they set their eyes north, on the open grass of Kansas, the land of John Brown.
The leader of the move understood the symbolism perfectly. Benjamin Pap Singleton, himself formerly enslaved, called himself a Black Moses, leading 40,000 people toward Kansas and the West. Here is the man. That is Pap Singleton. His organizing helped move some 20,000 people to Kansas in about 2 years. Across the wider migration, as many as 40,000 reached Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado. One man with circulars and conviction, moving a nation of people.
And when they arrived, some of them did something breathtaking. They built their own towns, from the ground up. The most famous is Nicodemus, Kansas, founded in 1877 and named for a figure in the Bible. Let me show you where it sits. Out there on the northwest Kansas plains, far from anything, that dot is Nicodemus. It is the oldest and only surviving all-Black town west of the Mississippi, founded during Reconstruction by former slaves. Today, it is a National Park Service historic site. Its little church still stands on the open prairie.
Here is what that town actually looks like, still standing. That limestone hall, with Nicodemus carved into the stone, was built by a community that refused to be told where it could live. And Kansas was not alone. Just south, Oklahoma became home to more than 50 all-Black towns, more than any other state in the country.
Take Bowley, this brick church still standing today. These towns were fully self-governed. As the Oklahoma Historical Society put it, nowhere else did so many African Americans come together to create, occupy, and govern their own communities. Bowley even hosted the largest Black rodeo in the nation.
But frontier towns are fragile. When the railroad bypassed Nicodemus and the Dust Bowl and the Depression hit, families had to move again. And the place so many of them landed and stayed is a city. The city this whole story has been walking toward.
When the frontier towns faded, the cities endured. And for Black Kansas, no city mattered more than Wichita. This is where families finally set down roots and stayed. This is home base for this whole story.
Wichita earned that role honestly. Its Black community is, in the words of the National Park Service, as old as the city itself. It grew first from that 1879 Exoduster wave, and then a second huge wave in the 1920s and 30s, as people left the South for work. Let me put the city on the map. There it is, South Central Kansas, on the Arkansas River, a working city. And the work is the reason so many came. Wichita has a nickname that tells you everything: the air capital of the world.
And that nickname was earned in a hurry. Let me show you the scale, because World War II turned Wichita into a machine. During the war, Wichita built nearly 26,000 military aircraft. Its population leaped from about 115,000 in 1940 to roughly 200,000 by 1943. In 3 years, workers poured in from everywhere, and the factories ran day and night.
But a city is not just its factories. It is its front porches and its churches. And at the heart of Black Wichita was Calvary Baptist Church, organized in 1878 to serve a growing community.
That building still stands today. It now houses the Kansas African American Museum, so the community's own history lives right inside the walls that community built. And to be completely honest with you, we could not find a specific historic Dunn in Wichita's records through public sources, and we would never invent one. But that is not the point. The point is the city itself, the church, the neighborhood, the community. This is the Wichita a Black family would have known and loved.
It is the community that produced the last and maybe the greatest chapter of this whole journey. Because Wichita is not just where a family put down roots. It is where a handful of young people did something that most history books credit to a different city entirely.
That is the beat everyone should know, and almost no one does. From a name born on an Irish hillside to a lunch counter in Kansas. Let me tell you what happened at Dockum.
The first successful lunch counter sit-in of the modern civil rights movement did not happen in the South. It happened in downtown Wichita in the summer of 1958, and it was led by teenagers.
I need you to picture them because they were so young. It was led by two teenagers, and on July 19, 1958, about 24 black students walked into the Dockum drugstore, a place that would sell them toothpaste but refused to serve them at the counter. They sat down anyway, and they did not leave.
This was a plan, not an accident. It was led by 20-year-old Ron Walters and his 19-year-old cousin Carol Parks Hahn, both from the NAACP Youth Council. They dressed sharply and sat with perfect dignity. They endured the taunts day after day for 3 straight weeks.
And here is the moment it broke. After 3 weeks of watching paying customers stay away, the manager walked in and said 7 words that ended it.
Serve them. I am losing too much money. That was it. 7 words, and a handful of young people refusing to move from a counter had won.
And it was not just that one store. With that, every Dockum location in the entire state of Kansas was desegregated. 1 counter in Wichita, and a whole chain fell. Now here is the fact that reframes everything you were taught. The Dockum sit-in happened in 1958.
Hold on, 58, that is before Greensboro.
2 years before, the famous Greensboro sit-in, the one in every textbook, happened in 1960. Wichita did it first and beat the famous one by nearly 2 years.
And they marked it properly. A 20-foot bronze sculpture of that lunch counter now stands in downtown Wichita, so the courage is not forgotten again. Ron Walters, that 20-year-old, went on to become one of the most respected political scientists in America.
So think about the arc we just walked, laid out end to end. It starts 1102, the first written Ó Duinn on an Irish hillside. Then 1865, Emancipation, when the name is chosen in freedom. 1879, the Exodusters walk to Kansas. And 1958, Wichita, where the children of that journey sat down at a counter and would not get up.
If you remember one thing from all of this, remember this. A surname is never just a label. It is a story that survived everything the world threw at it and is still being carried by the people who choose it today. The whole journey in one breath. Dunn means the dark one, from the Irish Ó Duinn. It grew 2 roots, became a proud African-American name after Emancipation, gave us Oscar Dunn, and rode with the Exodusters to Wichita and a lunch counter that changed the country.
My favorite move is the spelling. That one extra letter, Dunn or Dunn, is a map of 2 journeys hiding in plain sight.
Here is what you keep. The next time you sign your own last name, you will know it is not just a label. It is something people fought to hold, and sometimes chose in freedom so that you could carry it.
And remember the counter where the young people would not stand up. Wichita beat the famous one by 2 years, and almost no one knows.
If a story like this is why you are here, subscribe, because next time we take one ordinary thing you never questioned and pull the single hidden chapter almost no one knows into the light.
Here is the one we are handing to you. What does your last name mean, and where did your family carry it from? If your name holds a story like Dunn's, we genuinely want to hear it.
This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.